Thank you, Katja, for organizing this. I think it's really a great way also to unpack all the knowledge that is available in the group of challengers. And I really hope the fellow challengers can also have the time to present something about what they know and they're busy about. I'm really eager to learn from them. And so thank you for the opportunity to be the first to share. So I'll be talking about, well, basically the protein shift and why plant-based diets are so important for fighting climate change, but also for our health. And it will be a mixture of a bit more theoretical and more practical tips and tricks. But feel free to interrupt. I mean, I think it's nice if we can also just have a conversation in between. And perhaps to start off, I'll share my slides in a bit, but I would also like to share why I'm so passionate about food, because for me it started in 2010. Before that, I was not involved in food at all. I was like, okay, it's a thing, we need to do it 3 times a day. Nothing important. But then I went abroad to Ecuador on a volunteering project, and I saw with my own eyes how global demands for grain changed the climate there. So what happened, it was a bit up in the Andes, and traditionally the farmers they had small plots and they used the slash and burn technique to fertilize their land. It's not the ideal way, of course, but it worked for them. It was on a small surface, nothing to worry. But then global demands went up and they tried to increase their production and their yields, of course. And little by little, they started deforestating the area. And so in the end, there was so little forest left that it altered the rainfall. Because forest creates a type of atmosphere. That's also what they see with the Amazon. And because of the vastness of the trees that evaporate humidity and stuff, there is an interaction with the weather, and there is more rainfall usually where there are more forests. And so because of the deforestation in the area, this changed, and all of a sudden the rainfall went down. I mean, it was a slow progress, of course, but well, in 2010 they really already felt the changes in climate. The yields went down, of course, more poverty came in. And so for me, this really struck me, because of demands also in Europe, because they were selling to Europe as well, their climate changed, and it changed something in me. And so it's then that I also decided to skip meat and fish from my diet. I'm not a vegan or anything, but I really started to look at animal products as something super valuable, and that we should really use as a taste maker, smaakmaker, more than the main source of our proteins. And then the more I learned about food, the more I understood what a huge potential it has. It is creating our landscapes. It's the #1 employer in the world. It's the main reason why countries interact with each other, for trade. It's a way of communication. It's a way of showing love. It's also a way of communicating between generations. It's a culture. I mean, food is everything for me. And so, yeah, I think that's really one of the main reasons. I believe everybody should take this into account if you want to have impacts. And so this journey surmounted in the creation of Mosquito in the Room last year, together with my colleague Ariane Louage. We set up this organization because we really believe that if we want to work towards more sustainable food systems, we need to make smarter food choices. And we want to help companies and governments doing this. And as I will show you in a bit, focusing on the protein shift, so eating less animal products, better quality animal products, and a lot more plants can really facilitate this change and this impact. So that was a bit of a personal introduction maybe, but that's really where my passion comes from. And I think this personal experience, if you have this as well, your eyes really open. So that's why I think it's also so important to go out into the world and to talk to farmers as well. So let me, can you see this in a like full screen now? My slides? I only see you, Katja, so.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, okay. So let's start why are plant-rich diets, and plant-based diets are one of the plant-rich diets. I mean, it's a bit all of the same. A diet with more plants and less animal products. So you have Project Drawdown, and basically what they do, it's an international organization. They make a list of climate solutions. And the interesting thing is that all of the solutions they look at are already existing. And so they make a list on the impacts and the potential they have to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. And then, they compare them to one another. And here you see actually the top 5 of most impactful solutions. And the first 2 solutions involve food. So reducing food waste has a huge impact. And in Belgium, there are already some efforts going on there. You have an organization called Foodwin, which is really super professional and really helps farmers, helps companies to reduce their food waste. And well, it's an interesting solution because it's cost effective and it has an impact on emissions. And then on the second row, you have the plant-based diets, and it's the reason why with Mosquito in the Room we really focus on this solution, because in Belgium I think there is a lot more to be done in this aspect. If we talk about food and the food system, it's amazing like how many areas of impact there are. So I've talked about climate change. The calculations show that about 1/4 to 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system. So that's already huge. And the thing is, if you compare like the source of most man-made greenhouse gas emissions, you have the energy sector, which is very important, and then you have the food sector. And scientists Sen Akkoord agreed that we cannot reach the targets in the Paris Climate Agreement if we don't do anything about our food system. So I'll talk about it later in a bit. Of course, you have the impact of the food system on water and water use, and especially again, like the livestock has a huge impact on the usage of drinkable water. Of course, you have all the issues on animal welfare, that, well, we raise way too many animals on way too small a surface, and scientists think in the future there will be many more cases of zoonosis. So that means that a disease from animals will jump and will mutate and will become a disease for humans as well. So that's also really a reason to look at. Then, of course, you have the huge land area that agriculture uses, and I'll dive into that later. You have the degrees of biodiversity, which is really linked also on the use of pesticides, on the use of fertilizers, on the way we do agriculture, especially in the West. And then, of course, you have the impact on our health, which is really huge. There are more at this moment. Each year, I looked it up, about 2.8 million people are dying prematurely because of a bad diet. So, I mean, and that's perfectly preventable. So yeah, really, really big impact here if we can alter something about the food system. So the reduction potential, like I said, is huge. And this is a nice graph that shows it very well, I think. So they've calculated that between 2020 and the end of the century, the food system alone will emit more than 1,300 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And basically that uses up all of the reserve on greenhouse gases that we have if we want to stay below the target of 2 degrees temperature rise. So, I mean, we really need to do something about the emission of our food system. And if you then look at where these changes can be made, you have several solutions. Of course, increasing our yields can reduce the greenhouse gases. Halving the food waste is important. Having a healthier diet, not overeating, eating healthy foods instead of a fast food diet, like we see more and more happening in the States. Of course, also sharing best practices. Especially in Belgium, for example, we have a very efficient livestock production, and we should really be sharing these methods because it can reduce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions in other parts of the world. And then, like, almost 50% in reduction can be made if all of us ate less animal products and more plants. And like you see in the graph, it really means less animal products. It's not to advocate a wholly 100% plant-based diet. I think this is really also very important to know. And the main reason why I'm really showing this to you is that you eat 3 times a day. Every time you eat, you have a vote and you have an impact on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And so you contribute to mitigating climate change. So if we look deeper on like the general emissions of the food system, there is quite some difference between where the greenhouse gas emissions come from. A lot of it basically comes from the production and from the land use change it entices. And so 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions are emitted in the phase of production, where almost 50% of these emissions come from livestock. And why is that such a huge contributor? Well, it's basically because of this cute little big animal, the cow, and in large, the group of ruminants. And so what do ruminants have in common? Is that to digest the grasses, they use enteric fermentation. And what that means is that they have several stomachs. And so they transmit the food they eat from stomach to stomach. And in these several stomachs, I don't know, magen, there are bacteria that digest the food. And by digesting, these bacteria create methane. And every time the food changes from stomach, the cow burps, and the methane is set free. And that's really why these ruminants have such a big impact on our climate. And next to the burps, you also have the manure, of course, the poop of the cow that is also emitting nitrous oxide, which is also a really potent greenhouse gas. And thirdly, of course, these cows need to be fed. Often this is done with leftovers of the food industry, and in part also with soy that, like I think most of you know, is produced in Brazil and is contributing to a lot of the land use change there, and is the main driver of deforestation of the Amazon. So poor cows, but they're really a bit of the elephant in the room. And yes, there are a lot of solutions to lower the greenhouse gas emissions they emit, but if we compare with plant-based protein sources, I mean, they don't come even near. So we should really lower the amount of cows in the world. And well, not only the greenhouse gas emission itself is quite impactful, but also the land these animals need. This beautiful map from the World Resources Institute shows it pretty well. You have so they divided the world into several colors, and each color shows the surface that is needed for the production of a certain crop or product. And so about 7% of our world surface is used for crop production. But it means like potatoes, vegetables, fruits, all these type of things. About 26% is forests, and let's hope in the future this will increase instead of decrease. But then if you look to the left of the graph, like livestock alone is using 27% of our land, and so it's for grazing, but also for growing the feed crops, and yeah, so it really has a huge impact, and not only on land but also on our water resources. And so here you see 3 different products. You see the amount of water that is needed for a portion of this product. So for just a steak of 200 grams, we need about 3,000 liters of water, and yeah, that's I mean 10-fold of what we need for a portion of lentils or nuts. So yeah, it's quite amazing how much resources livestock raising needs. And just as a side note, for nuts, this is an average amount of water. With nuts, it really depends on the type of nut. So cashew and almonds use a lot more water than, let's say, hazelnuts or walnuts. So yeah, just be careful to not praise the water usage of nuts as a whole. And then let's see just what your knowledge is on the climate impact of these protein sources. You have 3 pairs of products here. You have beef and pork and cheese, and then fish and chicken. Yeah, and my question to you is, which, I mean, in each of the pairs, which one emits the most greenhouse gases? I'll just give you 30 seconds to think about it, and then I'll go to the solutions. Feel free to say it out loud. Okay, everybody's eating, I guess. Yeah, basically, if you this is the main graph that really shows how big a difference there is between the climate impact of different type of proteins. And so, as you can see, beef is really the biggest emitter of CO2 equivalents, right? So it emits about 50 kilograms of CO2 equivalent for each 100 grams of protein. And so to come back to the question, of course, right? Beef is the biggest emitter, especially compared to pork. But then it's followed by lamb and sheep meat, which is a bit less, but because these are also ruminant animals, they also emit quite some greenhouse gases. And then you have clams and shells, which are cultivated. You might think, like, why does that emit so much? Well, it's because they also need feed, and because most of the time clams and shells are cultivated in surface areas in the sea, and so all of the harvest and everything is done by boats, and the boats contribute to the emission of quite some greenhouse gases. And then you have the category
it's not really, so it's not really the product in itself, it's more the way that it is harvested?
Yes.
Shells? Okay.
Yeah, most of the time. And it's also, they have quite some problems with diseases. So they need a lot of antibiotics. Yeah. And sometimes they also need fertilizers. And so the production of these products also contribute to it, yes. And it's the same with fish, cultivated fish, but there the feed that they get, often it's wild caught fish. And so it's the fishing with the big boats that is contributing a lot there, and also the fermentation of feed that stays in the basins where the fish are cultivated, that starts to ferment and then emits greenhouse gases. And so then you have like cheese and milk, which are also quite big emitters if you compare it to plant-based products. Cheese is a bigger emitter than pork meat. And this is really, I think, important to know, because a lot of people that want to contribute with their food to the climate start eating vegetarian. Okay, fun. Okay, but then we can still eat cheese. Yeah, okay, but if you're really doing it for the climate, you better not eat cheese. And this is a bit of something still that needs to change, I think, in the mentality. And as a whole, like if you compare white meats to red meat is really beef, pork, and lamb and sheep. And then white meat is like turkey, poultry. You better opt for white meats. It's better for the environment and better for the health. And then at the downside of the graph, you see the plant-based protein sources, and they are really they are great for the environment in terms of CO2 equivalent emissions, but also in terms of how they are grown. They really add to the land, to the fertility of the land, to the fertility of the soils, to the texture of the soils. They need way less fertilizers. So they're really, I mean, they're great. I'll talk a bit more about them later as well. And so just to end this part with health, I mean, food and health are very, very much related, of course. First of all, you have the meat component in our diets that has quite some impact, especially red meat and processed meats. So in 2015, the WHO, so the World Health Organization, emitted the recommendation that we should eat less than 300 grams of red meat a week and only 30 grams of processed meat a week. And I mean, 30 grams, that's about 1.5 slices of ham a week, just to picture it. And it's because red meat as well as processed meat have been found carcinogenic. So they, in easier words, they increase your risk of certain types of cancer. So that's, I think, really also something we should take into account when we talk about eating patterns, that we're not only doing this for, you know, the planet. No, we're also doing this for ourselves. And then, of course, next to that, if you look at eating patterns as a whole, it has huge impacts on our health in terms of the risk of obesity, of heart disease, of cancers, of diabetes. And the thing is that all of this is related. And especially obesity is a very big challenge nowadays. We are really facing a pandemic worldwide. The amount of people that are obese, so that means that have a BMI of more than 30, has tripled since 1975. And if we look at numbers for Belgium, about half of our population, of our adult population, has overweight. So that means a BMI of more than 25. And about 16% is obese. That means more than 30, BMI of 30. And well, the thing is, it's not only sad for these people, I believe, because it really alters your lifestyle, your fitness level. It plays a role in depressions and so on, mental health. But it also increases risk of heart disease, so all the cardiovascular issues. It increases your risk of cancers and also of diabetes. And so all of this together also puts a tremendous stress on our social health care system in Belgium. And just to fathom this, in 2016, I think, 600 million euros went to the cure of these type of diseases. That's about 6% of the total budget of het RISIF, the social care institution in Belgium. And what I think is most crazy about this number is that it's perfectly preventable. Because obesity has a lot to do with what you eat, also with your physical activity level. And yes, there is also a genetic factor, but good eating habits are really crucial in this matter. Yeah, if you really want to eat well for the environment, we have 5 future-proof guidelines that we share and that has a lot of impact. So basically, first one is reduce your consumption of red meat. It's as simple as that. Switch to white type of meat, so chicken, fish, white fish, or I mean more fatty fish. Reduce the amount of charcuterie, you know, like salami, ham, all these smoked hams. Yeah, it has a huge benefit for your health and for the environment. And of course, just eat more plants. You don't have to skip all the animal products, but just eat more plants. And skip the waste, of course. Try to avoid food waste. And I mean, I know a lot of people want to contribute, but I mean, there are always excuses or sometimes also a lack of knowledge. A lot of my friends ask me, how should I make a vegetarian dish, or how would you cook this? And so I think it's good to have some guidelines, some basics about what a healthy plant-based plate looks like in mind. And so we basically have 5 recommendations. What I do is I always start with the vegetables, the greens, right? I fill 50% of the plate with them. Then I think of, okay, what carbohydrates do I want to eat? And carbohydrates, like think of potatoes, think of whole grain rice, think of pasta, quinoa, bulgur, all these things. But make sure you opt often for the whole grain varieties. In Dutch, it's volkoren, because it has a lot more fiber, which is great for your health, and they have more minerals and vitamins in them. They're less processed, basically. And then, of course, about 20% of the plate can be filled with a protein source. And I would really recommend to just reduce one. Either you reduce your animal product, your piece of meat or a fish, or you go for a total replacement of the animal products. Both ways work, and we'll dive deeper into the replacement of the animal product. And then fourthly is really go for healthy fats to top off your plate. And what do I mean with healthy fats? Healthy fats are fats that are plant-based. So think of olive oil, think of sunflower, arachide oil, sesame oil. And you can recognize a healthy fat at its room temperature. It's not solid, it's liquid. And so, of course, you can use butter once in a while, but try to avoid it on a really daily basis, because it adds a lot of saturated fats, and well, it's an animal product, so it will elevate the environmental footprint of your diet. I know some people say that, oh yeah, but butter, it has such a great taste, and it's not that bad for my health, right? Well, everything, of course, depends on how much you use the product, right? Friends of my parents, I mean, they use butter as if it were a slice of cheese. And then now that they're in their 60s, well, they're experiencing some health issues. I'm not going to say it's directly related, but it certainly didn't contribute to it in a positive way. And then lastly, well, if you are really convinced of plant-based diets and you want to go for the full 100%, you want to have a vegan diet, then it's really important to make sure you supplement your diet. And I'm saying this to be full in my information, because vitamin B12, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids are really essential for your health. So you should really make sure you supplement them. And if you have any questions, like if you're a vegan, you have any questions, I am a certified dietitian as well. So, I mean, feel free to ask. I prefer that you eat healthy than only partially healthy. Would be a pity. So if we really go into the replacement of animal proteins, we made a great way to think about it is to think about a food swap. So to really look for an alternative. So like I told you before, like I would really replace beef, pork, and processed meats in the first place. But what I would really recommend is that you just eat more of the really plant-based protein sources, which are under the line, the dotted line. So increase the consumption of pulses and legumes. Eat a bit more nuts and seeds, and try to experiment with the real meat substitutes. And the range has increased, I think, quarterfold these last few years. And I'll dive deeper into these 4 plant-based protein source categories a bit further. So I just wonder, like, with what of these categories do you have experienced yourself? Like, what type of product is the easiest to substitute meat or fish for you? So feel free to.
I tend to go for the burgers, the vegetable burgers or stuff. Because I'm the only vegetarian in my family.
Yeah.
So, and my husband is the cook. So he just makes the regular meals, and then I have a vegetable burger to replace whatever meat they eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And anybody else?
Jente.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me because I'm on a boat right now. But I was just said that I like all of them. I became a vegetarian, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, and at that point I still lived at home, and then my dad always like the regular Belgian dishes with just the burger as a replace, the veggie burger as a replace. But now I use a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. So.
Sorry, I think it's the.
But you did, Amy.
Yeah, she uses also a lot of the replacers, like the burgers and the other varieties, the whole gamma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
Alex.
interesting. Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. Sure.
Alex,
I have a little question about the replacer, because you the shelf space that they get in retail is bigger and bigger. And I think we all agree it's a different scale of impact between your beef burger or alternative burger, but it's kind of difficult to imagine or scale what's the impact itself of the burger. It's less because you don't need to go from creating a feedstock to give to an animal to get the meat, but to what extent the soy or the other plants that are needed are not replacing current feedstock used for meat, but just increasing the amount of land that we need for those plants, because it's easier to go for a tofu burger or soy burger than to go into what looks complex but is actually not nuts, seeds, greens recipe. Sorry.
Well, the exact amount of emissions of these substitutes, I do not know by heart. I can look them up for you. In general, any of these replacers is better than the meat equivalent. That's just plain clear. On the usage of resources to make these substitutes, a lot of it is made of soy. That's perfectly true, but this soy is cultivated in Europe. So none of the soy from Brazil is actually used for these meat substitutes. That's really, I think, one huge important point about the environmental impact. And what is also important is that the varieties they use are different. So it will be a different variety of soy that they use for fodder than they would use for human consumption. And then nowadays you see indeed an increase in the shelf space, and you also see an increase in the ingredients, I mean, that they use to make the substitutes. So where in the beginning was a lot about soy, and I mean, okay, soy has its benefits. You also see new experiments with peas. And what is nice about peas is that they grow naturally in Europe for a long time already. So especially France and Germany have huge areas of peas that are used for plant-based dairy, that are used for the meat mimics. And so in this sense, for me, it becomes less of an exotic thing that we need to cultivate to then replace the meats. And thirdly, I think meat substitutes, like really the mimics that also try to have the same texture, the same visual representation, the same taste even, are really important to convince the biggest amount of the population. a lot of people are willing to switch their diets, but they are not willing to make a big effort. So we should we really help them to make it as convenient as possible to eat more plants. And I think the mimics have a huge role to play there. So it's really to help the flexitarian to eat more plants. I don't know if that's a sufficient answer to your question, Alexi. Yeah, okay.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, let's just dive into each of these categories. So you have the pulses. Legumes are really the ideal meat replacer because they're very good for the environment. They are inexpensive and they can be really fast and easy in a sense that you can buy them in different formats. You can buy them dried and then it might be a pain to cook them, but nowadays you can buy them canned and then they're ready to go. You mix them and you have a hummus in 5 minutes. So the fact that they're so there are so many varieties of beans and lentils and chickpeas and borlotti beans and black beans and red beans that the potential of this meat replacer is huge, and the health benefits are amazing as well. So it's a great source of protein, but also a source of a lot of vitamins, iron, zinc, and they contain a lot of fiber, which is definitely something we need in a healthy diet and of which we consume too little nowadays. So yeah, I would definitely argue for more legumes on our plates. Perhaps the only downside of this category is the bloated feeling some people complain about. And basically what happens there is that the coat of the bean is made from a type of starch, and this starch is not well digested in our small intestines, and so it follows our digestive tract and comes down in the large intestines, where our bacteria ferment the starches, and so a lot of good side products are produced, but one of the side products is also a gas, and that's why we feel bloated. And so as a tip, I would recommend to start off with lentils because they're the most easy to digest. And then also use some chickpeas that are already pre-cooked in stores, so cans, because most of the time the starch is less present. And then slowly increase the amount of legumes that you eat, because if you would switch to them like tomorrow and only eat legumes, your digestive tract will have some issues just because we're not used to them. And it's a pity that they have such a negative image because they're really wonderful. Second category is, well, nuts and seeds. We recommend to really eat 1 handful a day and to diversify the nuts and seeds you eat. The thing with nuts and seeds is that they are really power bombs. I mean, they're very rich in a lot of vitamins and minerals. They're a great source of protein, but they are also high in fats. In healthy fats though, but still high in fats. So we recommend to add them as a topping, to use them in a spread on your sandwich, but to keep it like in reasonable amounts a day. And notable is that some type of nuts and seeds contain the omega-3 fatty acids, which is a type of fat that is unsaturated, that is really good for our health, and that we actually usually only get from fatty types of fish. So salmon and sardines, for example, will give us some omega-3 fatty acids. But yeah, plant-based sources are very little. I mean, most plant-based products don't contain these omega-3 acids. So that's why also increasingly eating nuts and seeds is a good idea. Then, of course, well, we've talked about them already a bit. The meat substitutes, they're always better for the environment, but for the health, it really depends. So the range of meat substitutes, like the mimics, is very big. And if you look at like tofu, tempeh, seitan, and corn, these are always an excellent choice for your health and for the environment. But with the others, with the meat mimics, it's a different story. The nutritional values are very different one to another, one brand to another. And so there, I would really recommend to check the Nutri-Score or to work with an app that can help you guide on the nutritional values. And for example, you can use the Kies ik Gezond app from het Voedingscentrum. That's the Food Institute of the Netherlands. You have a huge variety nowadays of these meat mimics. And just an important side note is, and I already told you, like, it's a great way to convince people to eat more plant-based because it's super convenient. The prices are decreasing, so it's becoming more competitive. And the fact that you can just replace it in a traditional recipe is really a great plus. Some people say, oh yes, but this is really ultra-processed food. And so it is not a great replacement. Well, actually, science, there is no proof at all that this category would be bad for your health in any way. Of course, it needs to be like the nutritional values needs to be okay, but in general, there's no evidence that it's bad for your health. So the argument that it's ultra processed is really not important at all here, and I think it's also really important to know this. Because people tend to compare this with like frisdranken and sugary drinks and snacks and so on, where there is a lot of evidence that it's bad for health, whereas here it's not at all the case. And then, of course, well, if you not all the products use a Nutri-Score and you don't always have an app at hand, then you can use some criteria for like a good meat substitute. So it needs to have enough proteins, more than 10 grams for 100 grams of product. It needs to be low in saturated fats, less than 2.5 grams. Also low in added salt. And then it needs to have enough iron and B12 to really fully replace meat. And so this is especially important if you eat vegetarian or vegan. If you're a flexitarian, it's less important because it's your eating pattern as a whole that will make up if you get all the macro and micronutrients. And so here are just a few examples of great healthy and environmental friendly substitutes, mimics that I like to use, not on a daily basis, but it's once in a while it's convenient. And then the fourth category, lastly, is well, yeah, the plant-based. I would between brackets dairy. That is really also gaining a lot of shelf space in the supermarkets, and especially plant-based drinks are really increasing a lot. A lot of people find a way to like soy milk or oat milk or and the The benefit is that these plant-based drinks are low in saturated fats, and they're great, really great for the environment. The only little side note I would say is that if you're really trying to replace milk on a nutritional level, you should always choose for plant-based drinks that have added calcium and vitamin D, and that are not that have no added sugar. That's the only way. Well, then you really have all the nutrients that you would expect from a dairy replacer. And then of course you also have the vegan cheeses, and well, there are a lot of new products on the market, and one is better than the other. It really depends on the brand. And a lot of still also product improvement need to be done there, but it's a very promising products category. And so just to give you an idea, like on the environmental level, what the difference is between dairy milk and other plant-based drinks on different indicators. I mean, opting for a plant-based drink is really always better, right? And on land use, and on greenhouse gas emissions, and on freshwater use, and on eutrophication. So there you go. And then lastly, well, yeah, to have a full message, if you really go 100% plant-based, you should take into account a few things. I won't go in depth here, but if you have questions on that, just send me an email and I'll be happy to explain it to you. Yeah, and then I would really like encourage you to experiment with a more plant-based diet. Easy options basically here on the slide. For breakfast, I think it would be really, I mean, for me it was easy to replace the cow's milk with my cornflakes with a plant-based alternative. For lunch, I started to first like to halve my intake of salami, and to eat still a bit of salami, but then also use some spreads instead of or together. And then for dinner, I think these meat mimics are great to start with, like to get the hang of, okay, I'm eating more plant-based. And then to slowly like also experiment with pulses and with more of the traditional meat replaces like tofu and seitan. And if you want some recipes, I can always share some. You can tell I'm a plant-based enthusiast. So yeah, this is, I mean, really my message, and also the message that we want to share with Mosquito. We really promote this protein transition, and we believe that everybody can make a small change in their daily lives. We really believe in a step-by-step approach, and we believe that this change can be made by all partners in the sector, whether you're a company, whether you're a food producer, a farmer. I think we really need to move this transition together and to work together. And of course, also like policies and investments from banks and other like investors in general we need them to create a prosper environment for this change to happen. And of course, like I hope I've showed through the presentation that health and sustainability really go hand in hand. You cannot uncouple or only look at health and not look at sustainability. And so as a last message to all of you working in companies and organizations, if you would want to work together with Mosquito, we're like always super happy to collaborate. We can like provide workshops and lectures, webinars. We can create articles, visuals, graphic design, or maybe we can work together on a transition project like we're, for example, going to do coming year with the University Hospital of Antwerp. We're going to look at how more plant-based diets can help increase the health of patients, but also of employers and visitors. Yeah, so I can only say if you think you're too small to have an impact, really try sleeping with a mosquito in the room. And thank you for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amy. That was really, really a bit of everything in there. Numbers and facts and personal touch and good advice. So really inspiring and great content there. I don't know if there's any questions from the group, or maybe you can turn the camera on for just a minute to say hi and goodbye as well. Yeah, oh, that's nice. Just see a few faces there. Oops, Alexis, oh, we only saw the closet up behind you.
Yeah, I have a question actually.
Sure, yeah.
What's your opinion about insects, so crickets and stuff?
Yeah, I haven't, I mean, I only had an hour and I clearly like to talk too much, but insects are great. I think it's definitely one of the innovative protein sources for the future that we need, because environmental level, I mean, they're great. On the nutritional level, they are amazing. And it's going to be really a cultural shift in the West, I think, to get them into our diets. And we are actually going to give a talk together with cricket this fall, because we need the whole range of protein sources to make this shift happen. And I think with insects, it will be important to hide them, to make, you know, like flour from them, to integrate them in pastas, in cakes. But I think they have a huge potential also towards healthcare, towards elderly care. It's going to be yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Have you tried any, Marlies?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of cricket.
Okay, great.
I have a lot of their products. Like actually at the office, we have their bars, and I have already convinced my colleagues to taste them. But like I also have the bags with really little crickets, and I personally quite like them. But it's hard for me to convince other people to, because you can really see the cricket, and I noticed that's for a lot of people a very big shock, although I feel like it's not very different from a mul or something like that. So yeah,
that's the thing. Why do we eat scampi's?
Yeah, I think scampi's look way creepier. Yeah.
So everything is in the mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brio, you wanna?
Yeah, quick question. Will you make the recording available? Because just for the anecdote, I met randomly a guy last weekend, and I heard from his girlfriend that I know that he eats like lots of meat and beef, and even if he goes to people, he's invited at dinner, and he knows that there will be no meat or little meat, then he will bring his piece of beef. So just to give you an idea, so
hardcore carnivore.
Yeah, so the we didn't have time to extend as we started talking about meat consumption and the impact of meat, and they just said yeah, no, but meat just represents 2% of the emissions, and we had to cut the conversation because I had to leave and take the train at that point. But yeah, I wanted to expand on all the rest, and you know, and so I think that this could be interesting to share it with them, the recording and all the alternatives. And
I'll put the recording into Mattermost for all the challengers. Now, it's of course not the idea to share it with whomever, because of course Amy's work as well. But yeah, she agreed to have it shared within our team, so I'll put it on Mattermost. Yeah. Okay, no more questions? Then just a very, very big thank you, Amy, for putting your time and effort in this. And yeah, it was amazing. First one, and I hope that it gives some inspiration to others to do other sessions as well.
Who's next?
I think, yeah, Jason said he would be up to do something, but we haven't set a date yet. And yeah, I don't know if I'll still be there when he wants to do it. So I don't know if I'll be there, but we'll see. All right. Thank you,
Right,
everyone,
great.
for joining. Thank you,
Thank
Amy.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.